until we officially begin in a moment. Fiona, if that's more comfortable.
Okay, okay, I'll do that.
Good afternoon and good morning to participants in Asia. It's a great pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's event. My name is Michael Berry. I am the director of the Center for Chinese Studies at UCLA, and welcome back to our Taiwan Spotlight, Taiwan in Dialogue series. This is a series that receives the generous support from the Taiwan Academy and the Taiwan Ministry of Culture. So I want to thank our sponsors. I also want to thank the Asia Pacific Center and the assistant director of the Center for Chinese Studies, Esther Zhou, who has worked so hard behind the scenes to make these events possible. And of course, to our audience. And it's our great pleasure to continue this series. It's a series that we've been really fortunate to feature some really exciting and innovative voices from the Taiwan cultural sphere, including film, literature. A few weeks ago, we had Arvin Chun for a wonderful dialogue. Going back a little further, we featured writers such as Bai Xianyong, Wu Mingyi, filmmakers like Tsai Ming-liang. And so it's really been a very vibrant series. If you missed our previous episodes, you can find them on our YouTube page. Just go to the YouTube and search for UCLA Center for Chinese Studies. Also, you can follow us on Facebook. You can subscribe to our mailing list to be aware of future events. So thank you all for your support. And today it's my great honor to welcome our speaker, a really incredible filmmaker. Her name is Feng-I Fiona or Fiona. I don't know, maybe I'll just call you Fiona for our dialogue today, if that's okay. Fiona is a graduate from National Taiwan University in classical Chinese literature, and then she came here to Los Angeles, where she studied filmmaking at the American Film Institute. She made a short film called JIEJIE, which won accolades from HBO and several awards, and went on to develop her first feature-length film entitled American Girl. And that did the festival circuit. It won numerous awards at the Golden Horse International Festival in Taiwan, 5 awards, including Best New Director. The film is now available on Netflix. Hopefully, if you're here, you've streamed it already, so you've kind of come prepared. She is also the author of this book, which is the screenplay and a collection of essays about the book. And so for today, we're going to have a moderated one-on-one dialogue about her career, about her work in film, about American Girl for the first half. And then we're going to transition to do something a little bit different. To make it a little more lively, we have a group of film students who will pull into the Zoom room, and each of them will have a question for our guest to kind of make it more like a master class, and we'll also be taking some audience questions. So if you have a question at any time during the event, please use the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll kind of collect those and hopefully get to as many as possible. But without further ado, Fiona, welcome to our virtual stage.
Thank you for having me.
It's a great pleasure. Fiona's in Taipei right now, so we're in kind of 2 different time zones, 2 different worlds. And I want to start with just a question about your background. I know in your book, there is a short biography, a little blurb, and there's a line there, which in Chinese says, 信仰电影即生活，生活即电影, kind of believes that film is life and life is film, and this integration between life and film. And of course, that's the kind of integration that doesn't happen overnight, right? I'm sure it took some time before a film became such a central part of your life. And I'm wondering if you could kind of trace how that happened, that transformation. I don't know if it was in childhood or young adulthood, but at what point did film become your passion and kind of become such an integral part of your life?
Actually, it's quite late, I think. So I only started watching a lot of art house films in high school because of my Chinese literature teacher, actually. And I went on to college and had a lot of free time, which I spent in the theaters. And it was only until I was close to graduation, around 25, that I realized maybe I wanted to do something related to film for my career. So I felt more confident as a screenwriter because I felt that it was easier, and I applied, but I didn't get it. So then I realized the competition was too fierce, and that film as a medium, I needed to learn to direct myself. So I started quite late compared to a lot of my fellow filmmakers. Yeah. I think because I was always more interested in language, and I wanted more to be a writer, like a serious writer. But I think in college, I did soon realize that people don't read. Literature doesn't have the kind of impact it used to have. And I wanted to be a creator, but to create something that I can have a dialogue with. Yeah. So I realized that film is the most, I don't know, powerful medium we have at the moment.
And were there special films to you during that period when you first started to entertain the idea of moving into the film world? Well, what were the directors that you were watching and studying, and what was most inspirational for you in terms of models that you may have followed during that period?
I think in the early phase, I think I was watching, I remember I watched Maya Deren's Meshes of the Afternoon in class. And I think it was really inspiring me because I felt like she had a very different voice. And I think that was, for me, the first time that I feel like I have something. I couldn't explain it logically what happened in the film, but I could feel it very intuitively. And that really went on to inspire me to make my first film. Yeah. And later in grad school, I was more influenced by a lot of realism directors like the Dardenne brothers and Farhadi, and of course, Ho Xiaoxue.
Great. You mentioned literature before, and I want to go back to your background at National Taiwan University studying classical Chinese literature, because your films up to this point, both your short and your feature, are very kind of contemporary. And contemporary, I mean, American Girl set 20 years ago, but it's still kind of our generation. But I'm wondering, that other world of classical or pre-modern Chinese literature, how has that impacted your sensibilities as a storyteller in terms of how you approach narrative? I wonder, in particular, are there any like classical Chinese literary devices that you consciously try to interpret visually or employ into your work as a filmmaker?
Yeah, this is a really hard question. I thought about it all night. I think my literature background has affected me in ways that I have a more classical narrative. Like, American Girl is still a 3-act structure and all that. But as for, I don't think I incorporated anything very consciously, but I think subconsciously I incorporated the aesthetic of Chinese literature, I think a little bit more understated. And I just wanted I wanted my film to feel as natural as possible, meaning that you don't really see the filmmaker. I wanted to really be invisible, I think. I think that comes from, I don't know, my appreciation. That's what because when I started to make films, I think I was more interested in more expressive films. But I think as I later matured, I realized I found more interest in creating, just reflecting life, just really closely observing it. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then later when you went from Taipei to Los Angeles at AFI, I'm wondering, what was that time at AFI and what were some of the greatest lessons you learned or took away from film school?
I learned a lot because I went in making only one short film, and I had classmates that had made features. So it was really tough for me. And the first year, I tried different genres, different narratives, and it was only, and I think there's three really important things I learned at AFI. I think the first one is to track the audience's journey, to be very conscious of how the audience receive story and how they put the dots together. And the second one is point of view. The importance, I remember us spending a whole year on point of view. What is the point of view of the director? What is the point of view of the camera? What is the point of view of the character? So it's really learning how to layer all these kind of point of views and balance them within the story. Yeah, and what else? Yeah, I think these two are the most important things. And to learn because AFI, we go in already splitting into different categories. So I think AFI really helped me in learning how to work with a bigger team, like to work with a co-writer, story editor, and working with editors. So yeah.
Great. You also made your first short around this time, JIEJIE, which won the HBO Asia Pacific American Visionary Award. I'm wondering how important that experience was and what are some of the greatest lessons you learned from making that first short, and how did that later translate to giving you, the confidence and the experience to tackle your first feature-length film?
Well, I think it made all the difference because it showed me that a very personal story can have a commercial potential. I never thought that HBO would be interested, in such a small story. But when it won and a lot of people got to see it, I received a lot of emails saying that how much they relate to that, and that they wish there was more, they could see more of this family. So that really kept me thinking about what more can I offer with the same characters. And just being on HBO really differentiate, because people could stream it. So I think that made the biggest difference. I think a lot of short films, that has won awards, the problem is we can't see it. So it doesn't create as big of a dialogue as it could.
Yeah. And I mean, the main part that we're going to talk about today is American Girl. Of course, that's the film that's been winning so many awards. And as we mentioned, it's streaming on Netflix now. Could you walk us through the development process, the screenplay, how it all came together, putting the funding in place? What were the steps that you went through in terms of making this film come alive?
Well, it all started with I wrote down the plot and applied for the Golden Horse fundraising platform, the FPP. So it kind of soft launched there, where we had a lot of meetings and I took notes, and COVID hasn't happened yet. So the major note I got was that who would remember SARS, something that happened so long ago. But I just felt like it did change our society in some ways. So the next whole year I spent just writing the script and I immediately knew that since this was such a personal story that I needed help, that I needed someone, a co-writer, to help me distance and really just see clearly what's going on in the story. So I reached out to my grad school friend Bing, and because he was different in age and gender and all that, he could offer a very different point of view. So we started just writing down details of what could happen. It all started with details, I think. We didn't start with the plot. We started with details, what I remember from me growing up and him. And we just did, so I wrote the first draft and then sent it over to him. He was in London all this time. And then we would discuss how he would want to rewrite it, and then just do this kind of back and forth.
And what was the kind of division of labor in terms of the actual writing? You were just revising each other's drafts and...
Yeah, we were just revising, but we would always discuss what we wanted to revise, and we would delete each other's scenes. But I think Bing was very generous in that sense. Okay, so I remember how we did it. So I wrote mostly from Fen's point of view, the girl's point of view starting out, because I remember that really clearly. And I had Bing take care mostly of the parents' scenes. So just to get everything in there, and then we start shaping it together. Yeah. So we developed it starting from a coming of age story. So it was really only in Fen's perspective. But then by the time we got to draft 4, we soon saw that there was a limitation to her understanding, and that we are ignoring a very important character, which is her mother, because we don't want to make her the villain of the story. So then we developed it in the direction of a mother-daughter story, which was kind of hard, because once we get too close to the mother, then we start judging the little girl. So it was a struggle. And then once we kind of feel that the mother-daughter story is there, we started adding the dad and the sisters to slowly, kind of organically, let it grow into a family drama. Instead of starting it as a family drama, because I think then it gets too loose. Yeah.
Great. And then once you have the screenplay, was the Golden Horse funding that you received enough to start going, or how did the other elements of the production come together in terms of your production team and other producers or funding agencies?
So we didn't receive any funding from the funding platform, but we received a lot of exposure. And I think the most difficult thing when I was transitioning to feature is that you really needed to have a very strong EP to kind of be the guarantor of your project, and you needed a producer that really shared your taste. So it was kind of coincidental that I met Tom Lin again, because he had a very similar story. He said yes to be our EP, and then it was he who turned the script over to Karina. And once Karina was on board, everything just kind of followed. So I think it's really, the strategy is to really focus on who will be the main star and really prep the script for that actor. Yeah, because all the investors, they can commit verbally, but everybody wants to know who will be playing, who will be in it, because that will decide if the audience wants to see it, how good it will be, and what it would look like, I guess.
And you mentioned Karina Lam, plays the mother in the film. She's a veteran actress who's been active in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Chinese film industry for probably over 20 years now. What was your approach to working with actors, and how did your approach change? Because I mean, this is such a character-driven film, and in that sense, it's an actor-driven film. And so, I'd love you to share with us how you communicated, emotions and scenes to the actors, how that differed between how you would talk to Karina versus talking to the younger child actors, and did you have a different approach to the cast in terms of eliciting such incredible and naturalistic performances?
Yeah, I had a very different approach to them. Karina was, because Karina had to quarantine before her shoot, so I had like only 4 days with her before we started. So before that, I communicated. She asked me a lot of background information concerning the character. So we exchanged a lot of facts about the character, and she wanted to know exactly like how much time has passed between each scene. So, and because I had 1 year since she committed to our shoot, so we were frequently exchanging drafts and understanding her opinion of her character. So I think it's like, once I casted, I wanted to shape that story around them, what I observed in them. For example, the final scene where the mother cleans the ears of the daughter, that was inspired by a family photo I saw of Karina when she was cleaning her daughter's ears. Because in that scene, I knew they had to reconcile somehow, but I didn't have the action for it. But I saw that photo, and I remembered that's what my mother used to do to me as a child, but I forgot, it's been so long. And so I incorporated that into the script, and Karina, it was very helpful that Karina had 2 daughters of her own too. So she would share, what she would say, what she would do, when she's confronting such issues. And that was very, very helpful, because, I haven't got to that age yet. As much as I try to imagine, it's just really helpful for someone who's been there to just share how they really feel about it and have her bring her life into it. And as for the 2 young actresses, I had a lot of time with them, which is very fortunate. So I used their weekends to rehearse with them. And the way I rehearse is I always do it on location as much as possible. We don't rehearse the emotions. I don't need to rehearse the lines. It's more about, I want to see how they move. I want to spend time with them. I want them to know what is expected of them on set, because I wanted them to get comfortable to me, and I wanted to know how they take directions, because everyone takes directions very differently. For example, the older daughter, she takes directions more, she takes emotional directions better, so I would share more about, what the character might feel, what she's going through. But the younger daughter takes directions more like logically, like what she's thinking. So then I would tell her, oh, I think you might be thinking this and that. So the art of rehearsing is really see what is their strength and weakness, and I will rewrite the scenes according to what I see in the rehearsals. And I would bring the DP in usually in the last hour of the rehearsal to have him shoot it on an iPhone, with an app. So to slowly get the girls used to someone around them, and so by the time they get to the set, they can still act with, 20 people around them. Because I think instead of just throwing them on set, I think it will be very, very hard for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the key is to create a very strong bond between the director and the actor. Yeah, to let them feel safe and to let them feel that I am there to guide them and not force them or control them. Yeah.
Great, thank you. A few minutes ago, you talked about how you and your collaborator Li Bing spent a whole year on this very meticulously crafted screenplay. But once you're on set, of course, things always change at least a little bit. And I'm wondering, during shooting, how much room did you allow for inspiration, improvisation, and changing dialogue and tweaking things? And in the end, how far was the final film from the original screenplay, and how much of that improvisation was present on set?
Well, I didn't mind dialogues being changed at all. For me, they were just, all the dialogues are merely suggestions of what they can do. But it is because we're shooting a lot of one-ers, so it was important for me that each scene was controlled at a certain length. And so I would let the actors know that they could add whatever they felt like, but as long as we're in a safe zone of that scene. And a lot of the happy scenes, for example, the Swanson, the hair dyeing, that was a lot of improv. I only told them that I needed these key dialogue said, but everything else was just the actors. And the scene that was completely improvised was the horse scene. Initially, I had Fen ride on the horse, but as you know, we don't have stunt horses here. So me and the DP, we tried to see if we could cheat her riding on the horse, but then soon realized we couldn't get it. We didn't have control over that. So we went to the ranch not knowing what we could do. So, and then I saw the horse avoiding that, and then I was like, that's what we'll do. But it's quite nerve-wracking. I think it's the one scene that I went in not knowing what will happen. Yeah.
Great. One aspect of the film is you watch it, it's got such a powerful style and identity that's very kind of consistent throughout. Some of that is the moods, the colors, the interior shots, a lot of night shots. And I'm wondering, in order to establish that overall mood and the visual design, did you have kind of certain rules or guidelines that you followed to keep things consistent throughout the film?
Yes. So we shot mostly interior scenes, right? Because that's the way we can control the world around us, because Taipei has changed since then. And so we pay a lot of attention to the textures of our home scene. And as for the DP had a very strong rule, which was proven very helpful later, is to avoid all LED lights. So and it was very difficult for production to find a street with no LED lights. And the scene where Fen comes home in a police car, all the street lights were replaced. The bulbs were all replaced. So that, I think that shot alone took like 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a lot of, I think we weren't sure if it would pay off. But when we saw the film put together, I think it was quite crucial that, you know, we didn't have that kind of light in the film that would pull us out.
Yeah. And you just mentioned this, and it's come up a few times, and this is really one of the remarkable kind of aspects of synchronicity. That is, you wrote a screenplay about the 2003 SARS epidemic, and just as you're getting ready to shoot it, a new pandemic, COVID-19, breaks out. And so I have to ask, what about the challenges of shooting during a pandemic? And not only the technical challenges, but also just in terms of the story. In what ways did living in the period of COVID-19 just change your relationship to the themes of the film? There's these shots where the younger sister is forcibly quarantined at a hospital. I mean, that's the kind of thing we're seeing, like right in Shanghai news every day. These kind of stories are playing out. And I'm sure that brought a certain level of power and immediacy to what you were doing. But if you could talk about both the technical level and the emotional level of these two pandemics and how you navigated that as a filmmaker.
Well, first, the technical part. It was shooting in hospitals became very, very extremely difficult. But it was very hard to really cheat a hospital. So we had location drops, I think third day into the shoot, which was forced us to really reschedule everything. And shooting at the airport was also became even more difficult because of COVID restraints. And so, but I think that affected more production. As for the emotional part, I think I felt that because we were living in it, that I didn't have to explain as much in the film, and that our young actresses who hasn't been through SARS know intuitively what they might be going through because of COVID. Yeah, I think it just helped everyone to feel what the family is going through, because it was very clear that before COVID happened, I think people in Taiwan really kind of forgot SARS, and what that, because people I think people didn't understand it as much. So they had very mixed feelings towards it. Like some people, because it was, when SARS happened, it was more in Taipei. So outside of Taipei, people didn't feel it as much. So for some people, it felt like it didn't really happen. Yeah. But I think COVID really put the whole world in.
And, as your debut feature film, American Girl is such an amazing achievement. So again, congratulations on this film. At the same time, I'm sure that there's a huge learning curve. And I'm wondering, with the experience of having shot the film under your belt, if you can go back, what would you have done differently? And what kind of lessons did you learn during the shoot that you wish you knew when you first began making this film?
I wish I planned for more transition shots, I think, before. In a short film, you don't need as much transitions or inserts because you just have a very short amount of time. But in features, I think it's very important because you want to be clear with the passage of time, and you need kind of a breather between each sequence. And so I didn't plan as much as we needed. So as we were shooting, we had to go back and reshoot some of the inserts. And it was really painful because not only we had to do already 3 scenes a day, we had to recreate the lighting just for this one single shot. Yeah, I think that's what, and the second part is the editing process was the most painful for me, because it was so much harder to control a 90-minute narrative compared to a 15-minute short. And just the fact that I had to rewatch it again and again from the top was I think it was, because yeah, I think I felt very lost when we were in the editing process. I felt like, oh, this kind of looked like a different movie than what the screenwriting looked like, because I think that it's a different logic. I think when it gets to, you have to find the language in the image itself. I think it was really hard, but I think it just kind of takes a lot of patience and taking a lot of scenes out. Actually, it was about finding what is the shortest runtime for this movie and still tell the story clearly, and then putting the other decorations back, I think. Yeah, so we cut almost 20% of what we shot, which was, I don't know if that's a lot, but I felt like that was a lot. Yeah.
Was that you that was pushing for that, or your editor, or what was it that made you feel like this had to be as tight and concise as possible?
The EP Tom told me that he think it will benefit from a shorter runtime, because I think he's like, you want to kind of be really, you want to have a very dense narrative. And I think a lot of, we try not to be redundant, yeah, to what we're trying to say.
So how long did that editing process last?
I think about 4 months.
Oh.
Yeah. But we were doing it, my editor was in LA, and I was in Taipei during lockdown. So it was all online.
Wow. And did that work out okay?
Yeah, that worked out okay. Yeah. I think the first month we were scrambling. We were like, oh, this is so weird. But then once you got used to it, I think it was nice. Yeah.
Great. So I would love to keep talking to you, but I want to try something a little different and bring in some of our film students, most of them from UCLA, but I think we also might have maybe 1 or 2 from AFI and 1 from USC. But Esther, if you could bring Han Xiongbo, Zhao Liang, Hou Yiyang, Zhou Cui, and Tian Hui all into the stage. And if I missed anyone, please use the chat and we can bring you in as well. If there were any other film students that had volunteered and I didn't just call your name. But Esther, are you able to bring them in? And
yeah, right now they're doing so.
Okay, thank you. So our audience, please bear with us for just a minute or two while we bring our students in. And as they're coming in, I see one of them is already here. So Zhao Liang, who is a UCLA film student, is here. Maybe Liang, do you want to start? And you can open your camera if you feel comfortable and maybe do a short just self-intro and then ask Fiona whatever. I think the floor is open, so you can take it in any direction you want to take it, career advice or filmmaking advice or questions about her work. But I think this would make our form a little more dynamic. So take it away.
Okay, okay, great. I'm gonna start first. I think my first question is related to what you just talked about, that I think Professor Berry asked, what did you learn the most valuable from AFI? And you mentioned that you learned to differentiate the point of view of each role, of each key role in the crew, like the director's point of view, DP's point of view, or kind of a little bit different. So I think my question is, I would like to get to know a little bit more on that and how that idea helps you to work with your team on this project specifically, because you mentioned that you were bringing the DP into the rehearsal. I think mainly that helps the young actor to get used to people around them. But if you can talk a little bit more about a different point of view of the roles, that would be great, because I'm very interested into that. And also my second question about is also working with actor. There's emotional scene, several emotional scenes that done very well in your film. And I think I would like to know about the family fight. I think that happens when the dad came back home and the mom is fighting with the older daughter. And you have, it didn't happen, the film didn't have a lot of too many cuts in between the shots, and mostly we stay in the living room and observing them. And it's a very long take, long shot. And then we go into the girl's bedroom when the dad is, hitting her. And I was wondering on set how you work with the actor into that scene, because that emotional scene, yeah, it really hit me. So I would like to know about those 2 questions. So that's my 2 questions. Thank you.
Okay. Point of view. So for American Girl, I decided that it should be a 3rd person intimate point of view, meaning that we do keep a distance between all the characters, but we have one character that we are closer to, which is Fen. And it was, because it was a mother-daughter story, I think me and the DP worked on how close, how much weight we want to give the mother. How close do we want to be to her? And we decided that the later we go in the film, the closer we could get to her. But in the first 30 minutes, it was really important that we establish the story from Fen's point of view, and that we are very, very clear what she's going through at all times. And we had a visual rule, which is to have as little shots as possible for each scene, as minimal as possible, because it was, I think it doesn't interrupt the actors as much, and they're not so, and they don't have to be so concerned about continuity, because each take was a fresh take. And so it's a lot about, I think it's about trial and error point of view. You could ideally write down what you think it is, but when you get on set and when you have a camera, it just looks different. I think it's really important to just see it and then piecing it together. Also, point of view would decide if we wanted to be using a handheld camera. Do we want to feel a little bit more emotional in this scene, or do we want to be more static? And the second question was about that family fight scene, right? Let me think how we did it. So we had a stunt coordinator on set to make sure that the actress felt really safe. And I blocked the entire action very, very close to the balcony, so we could see all three of them at once. So that required a lot of rehearsing to get the tempo right, and because there was a lot of physical movements going on. I think it's when it comes to scenes like that, it's really important to just give the actors room and space. And to really let them lead the action, see what they can do, see what they're comfortable with. And in scenes like that, I would stand in Fen's place and kind of demonstrate the whole action, so I can make sure that it's safe for her. So she knows exactly what they'll do, and just so that she can feel safe and act at the same time. And I think in scenes
so
like
for
that,
sorry.
Sorry.
So for the family fight scene, how much of that scene was following the script and following your direction, and how much of it are improvised or it's all scripted?
That scene is all scripted. I think they did try to improvise a little bit, but then it got too long. And I even deleted half. I initially wrote a much longer fight, but then when I saw them in action, I realized there was too much dialogue for them. And so I cut it in half. And it was really important that each sentence was building up the tension, and that we know clearly where they're going to. Yeah. So that scene is completely scripted.
Okay.
Thank you, Liang.
Yeah, thanks.
And Liang didn't introduce herself, but she is a UCLA. Did you finish? Or are you still with us? You finished, right?
Yes, I finished. I'm actually in Shanghai lockdown right now.
Okay.
I can totally feel all those things that Sarsing happening in the movie, how frustrated it is. Yeah, I finished my short film, and I'm working in Shanghai now.
Great. Well, great to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Unfortunately.
And good luck with the lockdown.
Thank you. Yes.
So let's move on to Eang Ho. Eang, you could do a brief introduction and ask your question.
Sure. Thank you, Professor Berry, for having this masterclass so that we could have an opportunity to get to know more about your work and you as a filmmaker. So my name is Yi Yang, and I'm a 5th-year doctoral student here at UCLA, working under Professor Berry. And my work mainly focuses on the study of Chinese films during the 1980s. So that will be the subject of my dissertation. And I actually have 2 questions for Fiona. First, so if I understand this correctly, you first made your first short film while you were undergrad senior at Taipei U, right? And then you moved to AFI and you started your second or your later projects. So my first question would be, how could you tell about the difference between shooting a film in Taiwan, a short film in Taiwan, and doing that in the United States? Are there any major differences between the two? And my second question would be, could you tell us more about the current state of the Taiwan film industry? Are there enough opportunities and fundings for young filmmakers like you? And do you have any suggestions for, say, younger generation of film school graduates? That would be my 2 questions. Thank you.
Okay, big questions. Well, when I first shot my short film in Taiwan, I did it with only 15 people, and a lot of them didn't have film experience. So it was a much smaller crew. And compared to my experience at AFI, we were working with like 50 people crew. So I think that was a major difference, to have a much larger team. And it's here in Taiwan, you don't really have union, you don't have that strong union rule, so it's much more flexible. I think in LA we have to learn there's a lot of restrictions that we have to learn to work around all that. And as for the second question, you mean in Taiwan, I think there's a lot of opportunities in Taiwan for young filmmakers right now because of the government grant. I think that makes a really big difference. And you wanted me to comment on the industry now. I think I observed that last year in the Golden Horse Film Festival that the debut director's age is significantly dropping. I think that has to do with, like the camera being more lighter, it's easier. We have more students that studied film in undergrad, and then that they quickly move on to their debut in their early 30s. I think, which was a big difference compared to older directors who start at 40. Yeah, and so yeah, I feel like there is a new voice, and I feel like where Taiwan cinema is trying to explore different genres, and they're really, yeah.
Could you add one more follow-up question? I actually have one quick follow-up question. So I was wondering, Fiona, have you ever considered making a more commercial film in terms of a genre film? I know that would be something you haven't explored yet, but would that be an option for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think by if any film that is playing in the theaters, then by definition it is commercial. So, I think I would be open to that. If a story demands it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yang. And let's move to Tian Hui, who I've never met. She's I believe, a film student at USC, and we want to be as inclusive as possible. So let's bring Tian Hui to the dialogue.
Thank you so much, Professor Berry and Fiona, for being here. And thanks it's really great to meet you here. And I'm a first-year PhD student at USC Cinematic Arts. And I also made a short film last year, which has been selected in some film festivals. And I kind of really into filmmaking right now. So I watched your film and the short film. I really like it, and especially how you put your personal story and into it. So I guess my question is that first is I noticed there are like descriptions of SARS and the pandemic in your film, and also there is a JIEJIE's song in the web cafe. So I want to know like how what are your thoughts in like in the details to reconstruct that era or that time that maybe in your memory or in the story. And my second question is more about the production side, is that how you get this project started or funded in the first place, and if you have any suggestions for young filmmakers who wants to get their project started or into a reality.
Okay. The first question: how did we rebuild 2003? Well, first, me and my production designer looked at a lot of our family photos, and then we would ask our friends what they remember the most from that period. I think it's important to find things that people have an emotional connection to, you know, rather than put everything in there. And we would even write down what it smelled like, you know, what are the sounds, like the internet, what the web cafe looked like. That would, and also films that are closer to that period also help. So EE was the most close in terms of period because it was dealing with Taipei in the 90s, and we're dealing with the 2003. So we were very conscious about trying to find the 2003, like the early millennium, and not make it look like the 90s. So I think that was, and internet played a big part, you know, the computers. That's why it was important that she had computer classes, and then she was struggling with the computer at home. I think that kind of disconnection was central for me in the movie. And also, yeah, pop music really helps.
If I could just add, if you look at Fiona's book, there are these incredible sketches, production sketches done by the art designer. Maybe Fiona can say a little bit about how this played in.
Yeah, well, so in the script, 50% of the story takes place in the home. And it was really important that we find a home, because I didn't want to cheat the geography, meaning that I don't want to use a much larger home and shoot it as a small home. Yeah. And so the home, we've treated the home like a character, meaning that we spend a lot of time discussing how each space would look very different. You know, how the girls' bedroom would be more colorful. It would have a lot of things. You could see that these parents really care for their girls, while the parents' bedroom is more bare. It's a little bit colder. And in the living room, that we would have warm yellow light, and in the kitchen we would differentiate the space by having a colder feel, like a bluish. This kitchen feels very blue, and that also even separating the balcony into, you know, like a really important space where a lot of things happen. The younger sister sees Fen and the father, and Fen sees her dad smoking. So it's really about making each little space count for something, you know, and have a dramatic purpose. The staircase was also really important for me, because I felt the biggest difference between living in the States and in Taipei at that time was the staircase. You know, it was on the 5th floor, and you had to really climb up home. It was a transitional space. Yeah. So, I don't know if I answered your question.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Before I go to the, go ahead.
Oh, you had a second question. The funding, right?
Yeah, advice for young filmmakers in terms of getting funding for their projects.
I think really focus on getting a really solid script. No matter, don't be afraid to share it and test it and have your friends read it and give you feedback. It's really important that when you share your script to professionals who might be interested in investing, that it is the best it could be, because these people will only have one time. They'll give it one chance, and that will shape their impression. So I think it's really important to make sure that it is ready. I think that, that was really hard for me, because it was like me writing for like 8 months. And you have to really resist the urge to just send it to some actor, I think, yeah. And really try to aim for the best option you could have, instead of thinking that, oh, that's not possible and all that.
Yeah, this is very great advice. And I agree that sometimes we need to prepare before we kind of reach out to other people. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Tianhui. And before I move on to the next student, I just want to remind our audience, please use the Q&A bar, because we're going to start taking some of your questions soon. So if you have any questions, please put them down. And let's move on to Cui Zhou, who is a doctoral student in Asian languages and literature here at UCLA.
Hi, thank you, Professor Berry, for the introduction about me. And also thank you for holding this very wonderful discussion. And I'm happy to see Fiona here, and thanks for sharing your story with us. And I watched American Girl. It's a very touching film. I'm touched by this story. So I think most of the previous students, they ask questions about the production process. And my question paid more attention to the content of the film. In this film, I noticed that you use, in many scenes, you use mirror. For example, in the when the father talks to the mother that he would go to mainland, and in the bedroom, there is a big mirror in front of the mother and shoots how the mother talks with the father. And there is also a small mirror just shooting the face of the mother. And also there is another thing shoots, which is about the older sister. She is in front of the teacher in the teacher's office, and there is a mirror. So I was wondering what you want to say or imply through the mirror, or the function of the mirror that you use in this film. Thank you.
Well, as for the dressing room mirror, it was just because then we could get the father and the mother in one shot. I think it was important for us to see them both at the same time instead of cutting them. And also, I wanted to emphasize more that the isolation of the mother. So me and the production designer discussed that we would have a smaller mirror that could help us. I don't think it was as conscious of a choice, but I think it just gave the image more layer and dynamic. As for the one when she was in the teacher's office, when we scouted the office, the wall felt empty, and then I think we tried to put on different things, but it was very, very distracting. And then we tried putting on the mirror there, and I really liked how we had, two Fens at the same time, that we could feel like she's changing, or she has a different identity. I think that duality plays nice into the theme, but it wasn't a very, very conscious design. I think we had it was just there, and I think it didn't distract us. Yeah.
Thank you for the answer.
Thank you, Cui. Let's move on to Kang Shang, who is a UCLA film student. Do you finish as well, Kang Shang?
Almost there, the last leg of it.
Almost there. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Kang Shang.
Fiona, thanks for sharing all your thoughts today. I really enjoyed the film. I guess for me, it's really interesting watching the film because there's such emphasis in the beginning of the film how the mom was emphasizing to the kids that they wanted, she wanted them to speak in Mandarin instead of English. And then I see that progressively through the film, there's a shift. I wonder as a filmmaker, like, how do you decide the code switching for the daughters, especially between Mandarin and English, because it feels really natural. And I know there are certain specific decisions made at certain points in the film when the sisters communicate, or when the daughters communicate to the dad in contrast to the mom. So I'm just curious, is that more on the scripting stage, the rehearsal stage, or the production stage? Yeah.
Scripting stage. Scripting stage. I think when they talk in English, they're a little bit more direct. They're a little bit more honest. And they have a kind of a different personality, well, I mean, because when we speak in different, because each language comes with their culture codes, right? When they're speaking in Mandarin, they're much more indirect, I feel like. But it's about whatever feels natural, I think, yeah, for me. And yeah, of course, some of the key dialogues I had to make sure that Mandarin speaking audience wouldn't miss it. So it's always about adjusting what are the most important informations that absolutely have to get across.
And I'm just curious, just to follow up real quick, that I'm at least my awareness when watching the film, the only point that Minanhua is really featured is the conversation the dad has with his colleague, right? And was that a very conscious choice when to feature Minanhua in the film?
That was improvised by the actor. So the two of them are friends, and they said that they were more natural when they speak in Minnan. Yeah, and so I was like, yeah, that is okay with me.
All right, thanks. Then that's very helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kang Shang. And Ziwei is here, but I think Ziwei wanted me to read her question on her behalf. So I'm going to read that. Based on my reading of your biography, I believe this film is adapted from your personal experience. Meanwhile, I think many of your previous works are somewhat autobiographical. I wonder if you have gone through a process of striking a balance between the autobiographical part and the fictional part. To put it more broadly, I'm curious about your thoughts on the relationship between the personal and the public, between the real and the fictional in terms of making a creative work. Thank you.
I think as by revisiting these personal experiences, I think I am also reinterpreting what happened in the past. And that gives you a sense of control, I guess, to actively understand what happened instead of just having them happen to you. And for me, I think in fiction, we can somehow get to the truth of how I felt about my family members, and I think, how do I put it? It's so vague. I think because when I'm living my life, I'm restricted by my own perspective, right? I'm looking at my mother and my dad and my sister. I can't see what goes on in their life when they're not with me. But by putting it into a screenplay, I started to imagine what they feel when so just I have a chance to look at my family from a totally like almost half outsider perspective, because they became characters I can remove myself from and to have a wider perspective. I don't know if that. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think that's a great and very thoughtful answer. And it's a difficult question, but it's another interesting kind of spin-off of this is one kind of crisis a lot of filmmakers face is the early period of their career, they tell these autobiographical stories. And then once they're exhausted, they have to move on to tell someone else's story. I mean, you can see that with the New Taiwan film movement in the early 80s, where, Ho Xiaoxian made this whole series of films that were either his autobiography or those of his collaborators. So you have Summer at Grandpa's and Boys from Feng-I and these incredible films. And then there's this almost a sense of crisis. And in his case, he turns to earlier periods in Taiwan history. Do you have a sense of once you've kind of exhausted your own stories, what's the next step in terms of where you're going to go creatively?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm in that middle of that crisis right now. I think there is a benefit when you draw from personal experience from the first film, because that helps the public understand who you are, right, at the same time. But also I think there's a pressure when you're heavily binded to that film, like you are the film. So when people comment on the film, they're commenting on you. So there is a risk. And for me, it's definitely how I'm definitely thinking about how I would move on to the next one. Yeah, it is hard. It's a difficult question.
Thank you. And let's go to our next student, Jingyan Zhang, who is also a student here at UCLA.
Hi, Fiona. Thank you so much for being here. I am a MA student from East Asian Studies at UCLA. So I typed my question in the Q&A box, but I will just read it again. Bear with me. So I just watched your film yesterday. So I'm very curious about, like, in the film, like Feng-I was preparing a speech for her mother. However, the speech was not delivered. And also the content of the speech is not presented to the audience. We as audience only know that the speech is from Feng-I's personal blog entitled I Hate You, Mom. And the blog is written in English. So I'm very curious why you make the choice to leave, like, the content of the speech blank. Thank you so much.
Okay, this is the #1 Q&A question we got in all of our screenings. And it's funny because some audiences are so angry that they didn't get to see it play out. It was, for me, I felt like, yeah, if I had presented the speech, we had shot it, it would be very, very dramatic, right? But I think that I didn't really think that would help Fen really change. I think the fact that she couldn't go, the fact that she missed it, she prepared, yet she missed, is really crucial in her changing in the end, in her accepting her situation. And also I felt like whatever she had to say in her mom should be in a private space. It should be very intimate. It shouldn't, I think it coming out in a speech contest was not the most sincere way that she could do it. And that just the mere fact, by giving the key dialogue, the key sentence of the speech while she was with her friend in the hallway was enough, I think, to hint at the entire content of what she might say. So whatever was crucial in that speech, I think was said when in the bedroom when her mom was cleaning her ears, and that she was afraid that she would lose the mom. I think even though the speech is not physically there, I think the essence of the communication is.
Thank you so much.
So before I bring on our next student, I'm just going to bring in an audience question. And this is from Seo Chun, who asks, "Hi, Fiona. You mentioned that you don't mind the medium as long as the story demands it. But how do you find out what the quote, the story wants?"
I don't mind the medium. I mean
I think maybe she is referring to genre or different types of film, as long as the story demands it.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you figure out what the story wants, or what the story is kind of telling you to convey?
I think I think it's trial and error. And I think I think it will depend on the teammates that you pick. You know, it is a team effort. And I think it's just having a lot of honest conversations with your key collaborators. And it's always important to look at what resources you have at hand, what kind of budget you can have, and to really maximize that production value. I think it's about working with restrictions and pushing that.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I remember, I think Ho Xiaoxian talking about, to get true freedom in the film, you need to know your restrictions first. And it's only when you have those restrictions that you can kind of know what true freedom truly is.
I agree.
Yeah. So let's move on to another one of our students. This is Qingyi Sun, who is I believe an MA student at UCLA. You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, just like Tian, I'm also a first-year master's student in the East Asian Studies program. Thank you, Fiona, for giving this wonderful dialogue with Professor Berry. And my question is related to the ending scene of the film, where I think Feng just went back from the quarantine. Feng-I, I saw her in the room and I could rush down and leaving behind an open door. And when I was watching this film, I didn't really pay attention to the bar, and I thought that something's going to happen after that scene. And until I see the subtitles coming out, and I know that's the ending part. So I'm wondering, like, what makes you want to select that very specific scene, especially the open door, as the ending part of this film?
In the script stage, that wasn't the ending. In the script stage, there was another sequence where we jump to summer and we can see the whole family walking together. And in the end, Fen learns her father's whistle. So in the writing stage, I wanted to end on a close-up of her. But then when we saw it in the editing room, it felt a little bit false. It felt a little bit too complete. And it felt like it didn't have the openness that we wanted to. So we kind of went back and revisit what other options we had. And it was, I think that image of that open door was a good place to end, because the fact we didn't have to see the family together. We just have to know. We just hear by hearing them. And I wanted to let the audience feel like that their life goes on, that it doesn't end here, and throughout the story, doors play a really key part. You know, Fen locks her sisters out. Fen slams the door. There's a lot of shutting people out. You know, it's about refusing to communicate. And I think by opening that door, she also opens the cage that she had built for herself.
Thank you.
Thank you, Qingyi. And we have another audience question from Jishin Lin, who asks, recently I've been working on a novel about diaspora. In the film, we can see the fluid identity of the girls shown through the culture shocks, reverse culture shock, through languages and so on. And we talked about that through Kang Sheng's question about code switching. Could you please share your thoughts on fluid identity in the era of globalization? Thank you.
I think that it changes all the time. I don't think you can ever be sure at that of exactly. I think it's just important to be open instead of feeling very lost. I think I used to feel very, very lost, but now I think it's just important to know that we don't have to be so eager to label ourselves, I think. And that, for example, okay, when I'm in the States and I'm called an Asian American, and I look at other Asian Americans and I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm more Asian than them. I feel 70% Asian and 30% American, or sometimes I feel 50% Asian. It's never balanced. But it's okay. I think it's just that I don't feel as lost because I know it will morph and it will change at each stage of my life.
Thank you. And there's a few more questions, but I also want to, invite our students to make this kind of natural and fluid. Those of you in the room are film students. If you guys have follow-up questions or want to jump in, please. I want this to be kind of your session. So feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself if you want to jump in. If not, I'm going to ask another audience question. This is from Yinhuo Huang, who asks, I really love the scene of the mother-daughter quarrel, and I believe it's a big scene in the film for the two to express their emotions and actually really communicate. Confrontation is usually the climax of a film, but this big fight scenes sometimes tend to be overdramatic, but instead too subtle may fail to bring out the emotional confrontation to resonate with the audience. How do you balance the dramatization of a fight scene drawing from real life when adapting it into cinematic expression? It's a great question in terms of this delicate balance to not go too far and not have enough impact.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I think it's important to know that our nature is to avoid conflicts. Like we don't want conflicts, and that they don't come. Fen doesn't come home ready to fight her mom. They get into the fight because it couldn't be helped. I think it's important that when I tell my actors that you didn't want to say this, but because she said that, you had to respond, and to keep it. So it's important that they're not seeking a fight. I think when in movies they tend to ring a false note because they're looking for a fight. They want to see it, but I think in real life we tend to try to avoid it, unless they're
Thank you. Masterclass students, any of you have a follow-up?
Yes, I'm interested in fight scenes because I think it's so difficult to do it so well. And I think I really like Eno's question because that's what I really wanted to ask at the first. This is really my following up question. So, okay, go back to the fight scene because you didn't have too much editing done with that scene. So I wonder, on set, as a director's mind, were you thinking that, okay, I'm gonna do the whole family scene in a long shot, and I'm also managing to make sure it's within the right amount of time because you said you wanted to keep in the right amount of length. Were you on set thinking about, okay, maybe I should add several more shots so that in editing room I have some way to save it if it doesn't work out? were you having that mindset when you're working on this film that you want to have some plan B for the editing, or that I think it's gonna work?
So initially we planned for more shots for this scene to be safe, but then we soon realized it was almost impossible to keep continuity, because it was, you know, it's very hard for them to remember the dialogue, have emotion, and always stand in the same place. So we soon realized there was just no way we could keep everyone properly lit and go into these handheld close-ups. So we resorted to giving them as much space as possible, and really just, you know, have the camera back almost to a wall. And for the scene where the mother comes, you know, rips her stuff off, the poster off, the camera was on the balcony. We were like outside of the room just to see the entire thing happen. And I tend to work very closely with my script supervisor, who always kind of quickly edits it together. So actually the fight scene was one of the very few scenes where we knew it would work on set, because I think the emotions were really right. And also the danger of having too many shots for this kind of scene is that you would tire your actors out. You know, when they have, you want to make it as quickly as painless as possible for everyone to really give it their all in. Because if people are saving their energy, you know, for the next shot, for the next close-up, it kind of just drags.
Thank you.
You mentioned that your script, sorry, just really quick following up question. So you mentioned that you have your script supervisor to edit together. You mean editing the footage together, or just
on
based
her
on her notes?
Yeah, she'll just do it quickly on her.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you guys gonna rewatch it and decide if we want to, what we're gonna do with this. Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Other follow-ups from our on-screen students?
Yeah, I'm also curious, like, for you, considering the film is so personal in nature, and then you have very difficult, aside from the fight scenes between the mother and daughter, and then you have scenes that really has high tension between the mother and daughter. I guess, like, I would be interested to know, like, how do you navigate those scenes, both in an emotional way, because it's such a personal story to you, but also how do you then give, besides doing the backstory work with Karina Lam, giving that empathy from the mother's point of view in those moments when they kind of, you know, come to clash?
I think it's, even though it is a very personal story, once I turn them into characters, I think I was very conscious that they are not me, and that I'm not asking Karina Lam to play my mom, and I'm not asking the older daughter to play me at 13. It was important for me to watch them and to feel like I could, as an audience, I could feel for both of them, that I could always understand that they're trying to do their best. And to always know, to always capture and let the audience know where they're coming from, I think is the key. Yeah. And I think Karina really hit a really fun, she found a really right place, you know, where she was, that we could always know that she really loves her daughter deep down. I think to always keep in mind that they do love each other, even though even in the fight scenes. Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is, go ahead now.
Sorry, just following up Constance's question about your personal life versus a fiction film, because they're always saying that don't let the reality get into the story, but the whole story is based on your personal experience. I just wondering, is it in the script stage that you've mentioned you have a co-writer working with you, like which stage that you guys decided, okay, that's how much we're going to take in from my personal life, and he is going to probably bring some other fictional elements and adding to the story and make the story really look like a story, not just a documentary about Fiona's life.
Mhm.
Yes, I just wonder how the writing process that between you guys, that balancing the reality facts.
So when it was still in the early 4 drafts, it was a coming of age of Fen. So I think that was very true to what I remembered growing up. But as we start to develop it into a mother-daughter story, there was obviously, even though I did a lot of family interviews, there was obviously things that we needed to work on our imagination. And so Bing really helped me with that part, what the parents might, what they might say and why they might do the things they do. So it's about, I think, you want to add what is fictional as later as possible for me. You want to stay very honest and very true to the heart of the story. So I tend to avoid too much fictionalizing too many things early in the stage. You really want to wait for it to be more solid before you do that.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is maybe read one final audience question, and then I'll circle back to our students. You guys, if you have a final question or two to bring us to a close, so think about final questions. But this one is from Ishin, and Ishin asks, "Hi Fiona, thank you for sharing your thoughts about the film. I like the way you portrayed the everydayness in the family. It all feels very real to me. Just out of curiosity, I'm also wondering whether you mind sharing how your families reacted to the film."
Yeah, sure. My dad saw at the premiere, and he was like, "I can't believe all that mundane stuff you could turn into a movie." I think he was shocked. And it was fun for him to watch another actor play him. As for my mother, I think she must have a more complex feeling towards the film, because it is revisiting a time where, they're not as happy. But I think for them, it really showed how much I cared about them, because as filmmakers, we do spend a lot of time away from them. And as for my younger sister, she said that she felt her role was very underrated and she deserved more scenes. She was disappointed. Yeah, but I was like, you have great scenes.
Great. So kicking it back to our students, any final reflections or questions for Fiona before we bring our masterclass to a close?
Well, I have one question. So, hi Fiona, do you have any plans for your future projects? Anything you're working on right now that might be turned into a feature?
Not yet. I'm just trying to read a lot and see what hit. I don't know. See what I think I need to recharge a little bit. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. And Professor Berry, I wanted to add to your question, because now I finally have a better answer of how Chinese literature informed my filmmaking. I think it really affected in the way I write the screenplay. I think in the words that I choose. And that makes a really big difference, because when I came back from AFI, I was used to writing English scripts. And when I started writing American Girl, I wrote down the synopsis in English. But then when I was trying to describe, like things in the environment, I found it was too hard to to translate everything. So I just had to face the fact I had to write it in Chinese. And I think that just the fact that writing in different language makes me think of things in a different way. I think because the way people speak are so different.
Yeah. I'm going to end with one final question, which is, this is aimed at our students, also those who are in the audience or future students who might view this online. But when you're studying film, there's so many areas, right? There's direction, there's cinematography, there's screenwriting, there's so many elements that go into it. And students have limited time, right, in terms of what they're going to really focus on. Mm-hmm. And everybody seems to have their opinion on how they should spend that time. Right, Werner Herzog talks about not watching films, going and experiencing life, right? Hitchhiking and just doing crazy things. I know a lot of filmmakers who say, don't watch films, read. For you, what's your biggest advice for younger aspiring filmmakers in terms of how they should mold themselves, or what experience, or whether it's reading or watching films, what would you recommend they do to make themselves better as a filmmaker?
I find watching documentaries really help a lot, because I think a lot of realism directors came from documentary, and I think it's about learning first to see things for what it is before you jump in and interpret it. And so I think I would encourage young filmmakers to closely observe people around you. Try to take your phone and just follow someone in your family or whoever, your friend around, and I think it would really open your eyes to just see them for who they are before you write a story about them. I think when I was a film student, writing characters was so tough for me. I think it was such an abstract idea. So that's why I think drawing from personal material it just helps ground you, because I know I wouldn't write things that my father never said. I could hear their voices. It's very clear that the characters are speaking from because of a certain background. Because when you're not paying attention, then every character is just merely the director's device speaking to the audience. Yeah, so I think watching documentaries and observing people around you is a great start.
Thank you.
I think reading is really. I tend to not watch that many films either. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. And I want to end by thanking all of our audience members who stuck with us on a Thursday night, our sponsors, the Taiwan Academy, the Taiwan Ministry of Culture, our incredible students. I'm so glad we made this a masterclass and not just boring old me talking or asking questions, because you guys were so wonderful and such thoughtful questions. So thank you, Liang, Yiyang, Cui, Kangsheng, Jingyan, Qingyi, Ziwei, and everyone else who asked questions during this forum. And especially to our distinguished guest, Fiona. We were so happy you joined us for this dialogue. Although it's unfortunate it's on Zoom, I think we hopefully captured a kind of certain vibrancy, and we had people, well, you're in Taipei, Liang is in Shanghai, Yiyang is in Nanjing, a bunch of us are in Los Angeles, so it's truly a kind of global film summit that we were able to convene here, and we're just so fortunate you were able to share your thoughts, your experience with such honesty, sincerity, and thoughtfulness. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Okay.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Bye.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.